Hey everybody, and welcome to another edition of the IAIB Spotlight. I'm your host, Andrew Zarian, and this week we are joined by a friend, a fellow internet broadcaster, someone that I've had many discussions about broadcasting with, many discussions about the technical aspects to streaming your content and using Wirecast, and we've had multiple debates about Wirecast and VidBlaster. Mr. Stephen Heywood from the Tech Buzz is joining me today. How you doing, Steve?
I'm doing well, Andrew. Thanks for having me. When you started talking about this guy, I was like, man, I'd like to meet him, but then I realized you were talking about me.
I'd like to meet that guy too that I just spoke about.
Yeah. I was just like thinking the same thing.
Steve,
it's great to be here.
Steve has been doing internet broadcasting for about 7 years. Am I right about that number? About 7 years. Right?
Yeah, we'll be going on 7 years here in March.
And you can find all of his stuff at thetechbuzz.net. So let's start from the beginning, because we recently started talking about technology. I know that you've been doing this stuff for a long time. When I started doing internet broadcasting and podcasting, I looked up a video for streaming, how to stream and how to use VidBlaster and Wirecast. And every time I put in the word Wirecast, there was you giving a tutorial. So that's how I discovered your content. But tell me about how you started doing this.
Wow. So I started just like a lot of people. You stumble on a live stream and you start watching that person. And obviously you say the same thing that most people say. Well, I could do this too, or I could do it better, or I have other ideas of how I can do these types of things. And so I really got started live casting. Just talk about technology, embracing the chat room, and having the ability to take some of my tech knowledge and just kind of share it with other people and even learn things at the same time. So
what were you doing? Just setting up a webcam and just looking at it and using a service like Ustream or something and just talking about, whatever happened that day?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, we would talk about anything from people would come in with computer problems. And when I started solving some of them, I didn't know everything, but I pulled from the community, and I wasn't afraid to say I didn't. We would solve the problem, and we would do a group audio-only Skype call with some of the regulars, and it kind of became a boom. People would come in, and even if they came in for tech help, it kind of snowballed from there. And I did live casting, man, almost I'd say 2.5 years before I did a official show.
I mean, we're not talking about a setup where you had a mic and, different camera angles. Right. This was a very simple, you probably had a Logitech 9000 Pro camera just pointing at you, and you were just chatting away.
That's exactly it, using a built-in microphone on my computer. Heck, it was even picking up Skype. That's how Cro-Magnon I was.
How do you make the jump from that? I mean, obviously you're doing that for fun. As a spare time, like a hobby, you're just going online and just chatting away. How do you go from that to, hey, I want to take this and turn it into some sort of, structured show?
Well, I had a lot of people, obviously, just like you have, a lot of international viewers and a lot of viewers within the United States here. And a lot of them just told me, it'd be a lot easier for us to know rather than having a camera on. We'd get kind of structured within that. But they said, why don't you structure it where you say, hey, we're doing a show during this period of time, and get yourself a mic. And I'm sitting there going, why do I need a mic? This thing's working just fine.
This sounds great. I don't need a mic.
It sounded awesome. And believe it or not, Andrew, a viewer sent in a USB PlayStation, I think it was a PlayStation 2 microphone from like Rock Band or something.
That is so funny you said that. I just spoke to someone about this. My younger brother uses that Rock Band mic with his Skype calls. I have to tell you, I was like, this is such baloney. This thing is awful. I was using that thing the other day. I was talking to one of his friends, and I was using his mic. I was like, you know what? This thing is not that awful. Like, he recorded the conversation. I'm like, this is an awful mic for a PlayStation, for Rock Band, and it's working. You are not the only person that's done that. I know a handful of people that have used a Rock Band mic for Skype.
Yeah, it's funny because they sent it to me and said, here, try with a real, what they called a real mic. So that's kind of what I did at the beginning. It was kind of really funny when I look back on it now because of some of the microphones that I went to over the years. But that's really where I got my taste into using microphone. And then I started exploring using a mixer, using a microphone, because I didn't even know what a mixer was. I mean, if you look Mike Phillips in the chat room would probably fall over if he saw how I originally had my mic.
I
Well,
mean,
maybe he would.
you
He's probably
do
used to
a
it.
radio show. I mean, regardless of us, having high-def cameras and different angles and the lighting and all the hoopla, it's a radio show. It's structured like a radio show. You intro the show, you interview guests, you talk about a topic, and then you're done. Were you a fan of radio? Did you listen to radio? Was that something that you kind of played around with when you were younger?
I was a fan. I always listened to talk radio sports. I wouldn't necessarily say that was something that I wanted to grow up doing. What really got me into it was just the technical aspect of putting things together and making it work and trying to relay that message. People always told me that it's easy to listen to me, and I break it down in a way that people can understand it. And so that was kind of like the push a little bit. And I've taken public speaking in college, so it really was easy. I mean, some people get nervous when they get on the camera, and to me, it's just like talking if you and I were in person.
Now,
Really.
you start off doing live, right? It wasn't pre-recorded
Yeah.
stuff. I've had this discussion in the past with other guests. I have a problem doing pre-recorded stuff. I don't feel comfortable doing it. Do you have a preference? Would you prefer being live compared to pre-recorded?
Oh, absolutely.
Because I know you did some pre-recorded stuff.
I did pre-recorded stuff only if for some reason we couldn't do the show that week or something, just to kind of get it out and not let the fans down. But I'm with you 100%. I think live's the way to go, and I think that really stretches you as a broadcaster. I think that going live and doing it, having the pressure of being live, knowing that there's one take, it's going to make you a better broadcaster, in my opinion.
I agree with you 100%. Let's talk about the early days. What was your setup like? When you started broadcasting, and how did you learn? Pretty much setting up a Skype machine and setting up a mixer. The information obviously has always been there on the internet, but it wasn't readily available in one spot. That's something we're trying to do with the IAIB, where we're centralizing all this information and making it almost like a support group for people. But how did you gather all this info? How did you figure it out?
So the earlier days, all I had was a white MacBook and an iMac. And when I switched over to using a mixer and using a microphone, my dad was actually one that gave me my first Samsung. I think it was like a 6-channel mixer, which I still use it at the church today for monitoring. But I used that for a good year and a half. And for those that don't know, I have a background in music, so I'm a musician on the side, and my dad's really good with audio. So, I called him up and I said, so they're telling me I need a mixer. What should I get? And he's like, well, I have one here that I could send you or bring it out when I come out if you want to try it. So he brought it out and we set it up, and he explained to me what the auxes do and what the gains and the trims and all that stuff does. So he kind of got me started in the whole mixing thing. But then after a year and a half, I noticed by listening to people that were audiophiles, they said that I have a hum to it. So I told my dad, I said, hey, they're telling me there's a hum in there. He says, yeah, it's in the board. He said, but I figured by the time that you would find that out, you'd be ready to upgrade your board. So he kind of taught me a lesson in the same aspect. But it was nice having somebody that knew audio that could kind of point me at least in the right direction to kind of understand the flow of things. And as far as Skype goes and mixing that in, I did a lot of no-nos, I'll be the first to admit, with setting that up. And I mean,
listen, in the early days,
Yeah.
I think a lot of us had really convoluted setups. I was doing, I was screen grabbing it on one machine and sending it through a S video into another, and then screen capturing that and then putting that out. I mean, we all did some crazy stuff because they really weren't. There's no right way of doing it. I mean, I guess there is a right way, but there's no set way of doing it. And we're all trying to figure it out. How easy did this come to you? Was it, okay, 1, 2, 3, it took about a couple months, and I kind of got the concept of how to do this. I kind of know what sounds good and what doesn't. Or are you, it took a while?
No, I would say it took a while because, I mean, I'm learning as I'm doing this, and a lot of it was just, my wife could tell you, there was times I'd wake up in the middle of the night because I'd be bothered with, this should work, or in theory it should work, and then all of a sudden I'd get the answer and I'd come up and do it, and I'd be like, yes, it worked. Splitting signals, sending signals, routing signals, and then when you look back today after knowing the right and wrong way of doing it, you realize that it just kind of bought you some time, and it worked, but yet it wasn't the ideal way of doing it.
What was the most insane setup you had? Like something that you look back and you say, oh, I cannot believe I did it that way.
Probably when I had a cockpit set up, I was using two machines. I had a Sony iMac looking PC, and I was using my iMac as my main Wirecast machine. So I was capturing the output with Desktop Presenter, sending it to the other machine that was like an iMac, and then using that connected to DSL to send out to the other streams that I was sending, the Ustream Adjusted TV, and then also using that signal on that machine to send return video to all my Skypes. And it was delayed. It was a mess, but it worked. And if I had to reduplicate that now, I'd probably be still scratching my head. I don't know how I got it to work, but it worked. And I think there's some pictures up on Flickr. I'll have to look, but it's like it looked like a quad monitor setup. It was just insane.
I mean, I've seen some of your studio tours from early on, and it was a little convoluted. I have to tell you. It was everything was daisy chained. But again, that's the beauty of what we do, right? I mean, we have the ability to take whatever scraps we have and kind of put it together and make it work in some insane way. So the evolution of the Tech Buzz, tell me about that. How did you come up with the name? How has it evolved from the beginning? Is it still primarily similar to what it was originally, or has it changed? Or totally.
Well, that's a good question, because it has changed, and just coming up with the name was by accident. If somebody told me, because I used my name.
I heard you had an awful ground loop issue, and that's how you came up with the name.
Well, that's not the story that we're going to tell today.
Okay. Maybe I'm wrong. I mean, those are the rumors. I don't know.
No, in all seriousness, somebody had said you need to come up with a really cool name for this Lifecast. I remember, because I was just sitting in my apartment at the time, and I remember somebody coming in and say, "Hey, this is like the latest Tech Buzz," and I said, "Well, let's just call it that, the Tech Buzz. This is where people can come and get the latest and greatest information and news at its best, technology at its finest," which has been my slogan now for a lot of years. And it's funny, the evolution of it, because now we're rebranding into uncharted territories, building a network where it's not surrounded by tech. We're calling it the TTB Network, where it's still founded on the Tech Buzz name, but building shows that are comedy related, sports related, and not as intense as what you're doing, because obviously I'm not to that point yet, but just kind of testing the waters to see how the network thing works, a lot of the challenges that go with it, producing shows, things like that. So it's evolutionized over the last couple of years, I would say.
But I mean, primarily though, you were always somewhat of a network, right? You always had multiple shows and you had multiple types of content. I mean, it was generally tech based, but
right.
Are you stepping away from the tech, or do you just want to add on top of it?
No, I want to add on top of it. I'm probably not going to add any tech shows. I think I've kind of dominated, at least on my network, that realm. I mean, it would be kind of foolish to have another host come on and do tech that's kind of regurgitating things that I've already been talking about, at least on my network. And I like the tech stuff. I mean, I don't want to be the face of every show. I don't want to be on every show. I like doing a lot of the behind the scenes and making folks' show better by my production skills, at least in my own mind. I like to, mix it up on the board and switch and do things like that, not be focused on being in front of the camera while I'm doing it. So I think that kind of adds some diversity to the network and to the different shows. But I mean, I may end up hosting other shows in the future, but
so you brought the network part. The network thing is interesting to me because it takes a lot of time and dedication to do a network. I mean, there's a lot of people doing an individual podcast, and a lot of them are successful. But to do a network and have a set schedule of every day, I'm going to go on the air and I'm going to do something. How did you jump to that? Actually, what was your first official Tech Buzz show? I should ask you that first.
Wow. My first show. That's a good question. I had a bunch of shows on the network that we did I think Thirsty Thursday Tech was the first official 3-hour podcast show.
Oh, wow.
Maybe it was 4 hours. I don't know. It was insanely long. And it just got to be the point where I didn't have those kind of internet speeds to upload this. And we were only doing like 480p or something like that. And I did Thirsty Thursday Tech. And then obviously I'm a Mac user. I love Mac. I was more total Apple fanboy in the past. So we did Mac and Tuesday.
Okay.
Not to be confused with Mac and Cheese. We did let's see here. We did Friday Free for All, which was kind of funny because that's how I met you.
Yeah, we
had found out about you.
We had the
same name show.
Yeah.
So we killed that off and called it Lockdown when I seen you had that show already.
And by the way, my free for all and your free for all are totally at the opposite ends of that free for all spectrum.
Well, and I came up with that name because we had a lot of companies that would come on to talk about their products. That was the whole point, and they would give away something free. So we always called it the free for all. So you want to come and win a free piece of software, you could win on Friday. But then we started getting into more the security end of it, so we called it Lockdown. And then Monday we did The Right Way to Photograph, which was a photography show. So that was I guess you would say, the main driving shows. I did almost 100 episodes of each one of those shows before I killed them off.
So why'd you kill them off? How do you come to that conclusion? Like, okay, I got to cut this.
I'll tell you what. It came a point in my life where I was sitting here and I'm going, I've been doing this for 4 or 5 years, and I feel like I'm doing something that everybody else is doing. I'm covering content that everybody else is doing, and I kind of always want to be revolutionizing something. And people say, well, if it's on the internet, it's already been done. I believe that's true to an extent, but I also believe that there's something inside you that gets people to watch you because they like your personality. They like the way you bring things across. And so I wanted to restructure. I wanted to change the way my setup looked. I wanted to get back to the bare bones, get back to the roots, and try to see if I can fix some of the mistakes that I made in the past, and get away from looking like other broadcasters and become and evolve into Stephen Heywood, the tech buzz, as I should have done from the beginning. And I'm doing a tech show now, but I like to think that I do it a little bit differently. I cover a lot of different content that most people probably wouldn't cover, and that's fine. But it's when you do tech shows, I think you'll agree, it's kind of hard to differentiate yourself from everybody else. There's a lot of tech shows out.
Sure. I mean, I've always said if you're doing a tech show, you have to have personality to it because it becomes very difficult. Why am I going to, and you know, this isn't a knock, but this is a question everybody should ask when they're doing a tech show is, why am I going to listen to your podcast when I could get the same information on The Verge or Engadget? You're going to listen because of the personalities. Right. That's the huge selling point.
I think that's the main reason a lot of people still, and it's a really widely downloaded show on my network, is the show. And in fact, I was going to kill it off because I wanted to get away from doing traditional tech shows altogether and focus on broadcast technology like I do with Broadcast Now, and keep that and just kind of go with it, because that was always a big hit. And I see in the chat room a lot of people like my Wirecast tutorials. I wanted to kind of focus on software tutorials with Tricaster, with Wirecast, with some of these different types of broadcasting equipment that people are using, and try to help in any way that I can. Because when I went and started using Wirecast, there was nothing out there. There was nothing that pointed me in the right direction. I had to get into the software and dig deep, and I thought, man, you know, there's so many people that could benefit off of this, and Wirecast is so powerful. I need to get this out there. And so I just started to rethink my whole thinking of an internet broadcast. But I also wanted to do some things. I got with Mike Phillips on the evolutionary side of things when I upgraded some of my mixing equipment. And I got with Mike Phillips and I said, listen, I'm buying this mixer. What else do I need to do? I've got terrible ground loops. And you know, he told me, replace my cables. I mean, if you're going to do this from the ground up, redo it.
Start
and I just spent the first, I think, 8 episodes of Weekly Roundup. And folks that are subscribed, they'll tell you it was just all audio. And that was because I was trying to tweak it in the best that I could and get things straightened up as best I could before I went back to video. And like you said, just basically starting over, because I hit a period where I took about 8 months off, and I asked myself,
Why
really
did you
worth it?
need to take the 8 months off? I mean, because it can be overwhelming when you do 10 shows a week or 7 shows a week. It could be overwhelming, and at times you do get discouraged because it could be that the numbers aren't where you want it to be, or the ads aren't coming in the way that you want them to come in. What was it for you that you took 8 months? Because that's a large amount of time to take off and to actually go back to it. When you see people taking off for a couple months, you pretty much say, okay, this guy's done.
Well, I think the initial reason that I could use as an excuse was my son was born at the time. And I was initially only planning on like maybe a month and a half to take off. And then I just kind of slowly made it longer and longer. And I found other things to do that didn't involve internet broadcasting. And you're right. I was a little burned out. I was a little frustrated. It was mainly because I've been doing this. I think at the time it was five years. And I said, 5 years, I've got a great following, but where do I go from here? Do I continue building and doing things that other people are doing? What do I do? What separates me? And I asked myself that question, Andrew. I said, what makes what I do different that's going to cause Andrew Zarian or anybody else in the chat room to come in and watch my show where he could go anywhere else and get that same kind of information? And I stopped thinking about what to do instead of just doing what I do, and let the people come in that like me, that feel like they've developed a relationship with me over the years, and just went for it. I mean, I'm not perfect. I'm not, an expert in what I do. I just do it, and I'm not afraid to try, and I'm not afraid to fail. But I think the failure point comes when you stop trying, and I didn't want to fail.
Are you able to step back and be honest with yourself and say, okay, this is not working, this is not good, I have to do something else? Or is that difficult
absolutely.
for you?
No, absolutely. I mean, just like when I killed those other shows off, I felt like it was just, you get to a static point, a stagnant point, and you have to say, well, I've got to do something else. I mean, this is just, even though the numbers are high, the viewers are high, and they like the show, I'm not having fun with it anymore. I feel like I'm just doing it. It's kind of like when you get out of bed and you dread going to work, Andrew. It's one of those things that you say to yourself, if I'm not having fun doing this, and I'm not making a whole lot of money doing it,
then why are you doing it? Yeah.
Then why am I doing it? And so I would rather create a show that I'm going to enjoy hosting if I'm going to be on it, and do that and start all over, than to continue doing a show that's just burning me into the ground, and I get to that burned out phase again. I think that's...
I go through that all the time, Steve, and that's a natural feeling to have when you're doing so many shows. Even if you're doing one show, I think that's a natural feeling to have. There are times that even with our success, I mean, we do our Friday show, and I took off for a couple weeks in the summer because I was really burnt out from it. Not because the numbers weren't good, not because it wasn't working. I just was mentally burnt out, and I think it's fine to, at times, to step back and say, okay, you know what? Let me reevaluate the situation I'm in. Let me look at what I'm doing. And, you could either go back and you might feel refreshed when you tweak one little thing, or you might kill it off and start over.
Exactly. I mean, that's something that I looked at. And I think the big misconception here in the broadcast world is people see that you've been a broadcaster for 5, 6, 7 years, and they look at you and they say, well, how comes he's not doing this full time yet? How comes he's not making enough money they could do this full time at? And I think the big misconception is that you're going to go into this making oodles of money that you can quit your day job with. And that's not the case. It's not something, I mean, if it happens, great. I mean, you can build this into a business model, which I'm trying to do, and I'm moving forward with that, but not necessarily just locked to internet broadcasting, more or less as a video production company with the ability to do online broadcasts, because I think that there's more to this than meets the eye. I mean, as far as video production goes, there's always folks, even locally, looking for commercials to be made, things like that. And to me, I look at this as great practice to hone my skill to move forward with that company that one day I'd like to be able to continue and move forward with. Until then.
And you said something interesting there. I'm a big fan of thinking outside of the box when it comes to creating revenue. Right now with GFQ, we have a very traditional ad model that radio's been doing for many, many years. We do our live reads, and we do our sponsors, and we do our underwriters, and that's how we make money at GFQ. At the IAIB, we don't take any, right. I mean, currently there's no membership fee. We never plan on having a membership fee. Whatever advertiser we bring on, we're doing it for the members so they get discounts on products and stuff like that. That's how we do it there. But you're talking about something that is not traditional. You're talking about pretty much having your shows as a billboard for yourself and being able to monetize off the fact that you're able to put together a decent broadcast and somebody might want to hire you.
That's exactly it. I look at it like there's so many people, even since some of the recognition that I've got here locally, that have called up and they want to come into the studio because they have a hard time believing that I don't do any post editing. Like I do my tease, my intro, I go right into the show, I do my ads, I cut to it, do my outro, et cetera, on all the shows. And I train the guys that I produce for that that's the way we're going to do it. Whether you mess up or not, we're going to do it that way because it's going to make you better. But I want the people that maybe are looking for a commercial or looking for maybe a small film or something like that to say, wow, if he can do that on live, when you hit go, what can he do in a post-production atmosphere, in an atmosphere where he's got all the time in the world to do editing and stuff like that? And so I guess that's my mentality behind doing something like that. I'm not focused on, hey, let's turn it into a full-time internet broadcasting company. I mean, obviously that would be great, but you also have to face yourself with reality that it may never happen. And so what is your backup plan? You just invested all this money into all this gear. Yeah. Are you just going to let it sit there and rot away and continue doing your hobby, which is broadcasting out on the internet?
And there's a lot of people listening to us right now, and there's a lot of people that watch the show, and they don't really do video like us. They don't really. They just do an audio podcast. And you know what? You're not alienated in this. You're not being left out. If you put out a decent audio broadcast, you could make some money by helping other people out. You know, there are companies out there that hire podcasters to do their corporate podcast, you know, to host it and to edit it. There are ways to make money doing this. And that's interesting that you brought it up, because I'm a big fan of making money outside of, you know, the traditional way. And you are talking about producing for other people. Now, you recently got a Tricaster.
Yes, sir.
Was that the mentality behind it, where, okay, I'm going to invest this money into this thing, I'm going to use it for my broadcast, but I could also use this to produce content?
That's exactly it. I think a lot of people kind of were thrown back. Originally, when I bought the Personas digital mixer, because it's a $2,000 mixer, they were just like, you know, I was the talk of the Twitterverse, the universe that were inside of my little bubble that said, man, he's foolish. He wasted money. Why did he buy it? There's no reason for that. It's overkill for podcasting, video casting, whatever. But they didn't know the real reason behind why I bought it, and that I have also a music studio here in my house, in my studio. And when I bought the Tricaster, it was even worse. And yes, I did buy the Tricaster. And I'm still paying on it. I'll be paying for it for another year.
And there's nothing wrong with that. That's fine. Listen, I'm a big fan of leasing, Steve. I think that's a great idea.
Well, I bought it and did, because I could do it with payments, and I had a payment plan, so I could do it. So, but the main thing when you look at it with video production, people know Wirecast, they know Telestream, they know NewTek, they know Tricaster. So you want to get these tools that everybody's using in the industry and say, yes, I have something that I can help produce. I'm using top end equipment to give you a top end type of product. And that's kind of investing into my future, I guess you could say, in the broadcasting world. I mean, I look at it, if I'm a broadcaster, if I'm doing a show about broadcasting, but I'm not using the tools, and I'm only limiting myself to one area like Wirecast or NewTek, I think you're kind of putting yourself in a box. So I like to play with everything. I'm a broadcaster, just like you. Hey, somebody throws a piece of equipment in front of you, you're going to play with it. That's what you do.
I might break it eventually, but I'll play with it a little bit. Let's talk about the Tricaster. Let's talk about your move to the Tricaster. You've been using Wirecast for a while. You're still incorporating Wirecast in your setup. It's not you're out of your setup right there. But what was that like for you to go to the Tricaster and kind of relearn everything? Because you were using Wirecast for years, and you feel comfortable when you use it. I had the same problem with VidBlaster. We were using VidBlaster for 3-4 years, and I made the jump to Wirecast, and it took a couple of months for me to get the hang of this thing. I'm still learning. Right before the show, I had to crop out your video a little bit, and I had a hard time. I had to learn how to do it. So tell me about relearning almost how to broadcast.
Yeah, so that was, and I'll be honest, that was something that unfortunately, we had a few guys that are in the community that have Tricasters that were able to kind of at least point me in the right direction. But you're absolutely right. It was a whole new ball game and learning. And the main reason I went to a Tricaster was because I sit in front of the camera and I do all my switching. I don't want to be tied to a mouse and keyboard. And I like to, I don't do the whole voyeuristic view of my show. I like to look at the camera, make it more personal to the viewer that's watching it, just my style. So I don't want to be looking down like this at my interface or looking at my keyboard to make sure I'm doing that. I want a physical controller. And that's, to me, where the Tricaster kind of sold me, to where I could just keep my fingers on the buttons, be able to switch from video to source, and not have to worry if it was going to be off or if I was going to hit the wrong button, because I could pull it up in a preview. And so people say, well, wow, that's a lot of money to spend for a hardware switcher. And it's honestly, it is. But I mean, at the time where I'm at now, I needed it. And so there were some other solutions that worked with Wirecast, like Korg Nano Controller. There was people that were using X keys and things like that. And they work, but you're still limited on what you can do with it. And depending on how it's programmed, you could have some hiccups. And toward the end, I was having some hiccups with the Apple script. And since I don't program Apple script, I'm kind of at the mercy of somebody that's programming it. So, but it was a learning curve. I spent a good 5 or 6 days practicing, pretending like I'm doing a show, so I could understand the whole concept and get that muscle memory down and just learn, so I could just feel my way around on my controller and know exactly what I'm going to hit and when I'm going to hit it. And so it wasn't that, because a lot of people even said, wow, it was like you didn't miss a beat. You sat down. We would have never known if you didn't tell us. And that's because I had to practice it just like anything else. So it is a challenge. It's not something, I mean, with anything, there's a challenge.
How much of a distraction do you think all of this is really from your content? I was talking to my wife about this, and I was saying, like, well, I wonder how different my show would be if I didn't have to switch the video and fiddle around with the mixer and have the chat room here and the laptop here. I mean, they are all distractions to some extent, but do you feel it hinders you in some way? Do you think it hurts the quality of your show, or do you think it kind of adds to, I guess, the what it is and why people like it?
Well, I can see the point of a chat room, and I mean, I have a chat room too, but more and more, I think there's a lot of conversations that go on in a chat room that can derail a show. And even one of the new shows that I produce, I won't let her look at the chat room. I said, I'll relay any questions and I'll scan it, because I don't want them to lose their focus of what's happening on their show. I want them to pay attention to their co-host or their guest, because I think over the years, I've let things that are being said in the chat room derail the direction that I'm going, because I start thinking, or, the biggest thing for an internet broadcaster is criticism. People will come in and just give you criticism for no reason.
And you know what? I welcome it. I welcome the constructive criticism if something is wrong with my setup. I welcome that. But it's in a sick way, I enjoy someone coming in and being like, hey, you suck. Like, I'm like, oh, look, you're engaging. It's better than the guy that's sitting in the chat room not saying anything. Like, there's engagement there. So, I mean, I don't know. I got a thick skin. I'm born and raised in New York, so I've heard it all. But I've had this discussion with many people about the distractions that we have. It's not like it's not in 1984 anymore, where you walk into a radio station, you have the board there, you turn it on, and you talk into a microphone, and you turn it off, and you collect your paycheck. Those days are gone. I mean, even now, I mean, in radio, people are becoming their own engineers and their own producers, and they're editing their own clips. So a lot of that fantasy of just showing up and doing a show and leaving, it's gone. And I wonder how much it takes away from the actual content of what we're doing. I think to some extent it's a distraction. I mean, just the other day I was doing a show and someone turns around, they go, oh, I'm having problems with your daily motion feed. And while I'm doing a show, I have to, talk into the microphone and have the camera on me. And then every chance that I get, I have to go and fix that problem.
Right.
And that's a problem. That's an issue. It really takes away from the content.
I often say, Andrew, I wish I could set up a drop cam. I shouldn't say I wish, because I know I can do it. I'm just lazy and haven't done it. So where I could put a back channel to where people could see what's really going on in there. They don't see, like, if I'm at this is usually where I keep my Skypes, my Skype 1, Skype 2. A lot of times, if I'm on a tight shot like this, you don't see these other two monitors. And sometimes I'll switch to it because this person's having, the person up top might be having issues with Skype. And all of a sudden they drop off, and I'll know that they're having issues because they've told me previous. So I'll make sure I'm on this tight shot. I'm talking. I cut to my other guest. When I go to my other guest, I'm sitting here trying to get them back up so you don't see that they're missing from that wide shot.
I mean, now you got to play engineer, you got to play producer, and you got to play on-air host on top of everything else that's happening. It gets a little funny at times.
But I think that makes you better. I really do. I'm a firm believer that it makes you better, because if one man can do that, imagine what you could do with three.
Sure. No, I think it's actually amazing to watch people do a show. If you ever have the chance to go and walk into Twit and see how they operate, or go into another podcast to see, doing video and audio. I mean, it's really, it's like a dance, really. It's unbelievable how you're able to juggle, the video and the audio and everything happening at the same time. I think everybody should go to Steve's house while he's doing the show. Line up. Don't even tell him that you're going. Just
don't tell me.
You can kick the door in if you want, and just go into his office and just sit there and wait for him to do a show. I think that's a great idea.
Not even just my show. I mean, I think if you live near somebody that's doing an internet broadcast, I think you'd have a lot more respect for the broadcaster when you see the oodles and oodles of wires. That was one of the big things my father-in-law said. He says, I don't look forward to moving you when we eventually move and build the new house and a new studio, because he said, I don't want to do it. I mean, it's a lot of work, and I'm sure just like you, Andrew, you got tons and tons of wires and when we went to IP Audio here at GFQ, the fine folks at Telos provided us with all our audio gear here in the studio. We were pulling out, all the cables, everything, because now we're just using one Ethernet cable for one source rather than having, both ways, one going in, one going out. Holy cow. I mean, we had a giant box of just cables that we're not using anymore. It's insane how much this stuff builds up. It really is. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
I want to talk to you, builds up. Before we wrap up, we got about 15 minutes left. I want to talk to you about the community around your show and how you've been able to build that up, because besides the quality of the video and the content, I think that's something you've been able to achieve that a lot of people have a very difficult time doing. You're very involved with the community around your show. And tell me how that came about. It's a very unorthodox way of doing a radio show, really, in the traditional sense, that you're engaging with the audience so much. Tell me about that. Tell me about how you came up with that idea. Tell me, pros and cons of doing it that way.
So the pros and cons of this is it's a blessing and it's a curse. And, I kind of came up with it because one of the biggest issues that I had when I was starting out was a lot of the bigger broadcasters, the internet celebrities, as we call them, they just acted like they couldn't be bothered, that they were just so busy. And one of the big things that I didn't like about that was, I looked at myself as just a regular guy. I still look at myself as just a regular guy with a job to do. And so a lot of the people that I hang out with and communicate with, I think originally it was like, wow, I'm talking to him. I watched him all this time. Now he just talks to me like a normal person. It's like, yeah, that's all I am. I have flaws. I have issues. I have, I'm just a person. And I think building that kind of relationship with people is good, but in the sense too, it's bad because that surrealism is gone. That whole mystique, that whole shock value that, hey, that person talked to me on Twitter. I think community is more important, at least in my opinion, in my view, and where I'm at, to make myself available to people if I can help in any way, if I can assist, because when I started, there was nobody. I had different community members that would come in, they would help, and when they didn't get their own way or they felt like they were owed something, they just kind of left me high and dry. And I don't want that. I want legitimate friends on the internet, just like anybody else. And I want to build a relationship with people, if I can better them, if they can better me, whatever it takes. I think this whole internet celebrity thing has gone to so many people's heads. And when you look in the grand scheme of things, you're just this little nugget in this little warped community.
Sure.
That you're just in this little bubble. I mean, if you ask the world who so-and-so was on the internet, they'd look at you, who? And I think a lot of these people make themselves out bigger than what they actually are. And if they just get over themselves, it would be a lot better. But that's kind of my mentality.
That's the amazing part of this. And this is something that I always tell people. You're able to become this little mini celebrity in this weird bubble, right? I mean, it's a possibility. You could have a career, you could have a following, 5, 6, 10,000 people following you. In the long scheme of things, it's not much. You're not on television. I mean, you take someone that appeared on the Today Show, and they're going to be able to get far more Twitter followers in reality compared to what you're able to do. But it's still amazing how dedicated. It's not about the numbers. It's about the dedication of the audience to whatever brand they're following.
Right. And I have a chat room, and not everybody comes into the chat room. I mean, a lot of people will send me an email and say, you always address the chat room, but what about us that don't get involved in chat room because A, we don't know how to do it, or B, we just don't like it.
Come in. That's what I tell them.
Yeah. I mean, it's not that we're excluding you or making you want to, send emails or whatever, but I want that personal relationship, I guess, with different people. I want them to know that, listen, I'm just a normal person who's doing what he loves to do and enjoying what he loves to do, and kind of growing together. And that, Andrew, after that hiatus, not to go back to it, but
please
after
go back
hiatus,
to it.
I was very surprised because you said after 8 months, that's a long time. I was surprised because my following now is bigger than what it was before I took the hiatus, which still floors me. But the people came back. People that have been long following me, they waited for that day and they came back. And that, I think, is a testament of the time that I put in relationship with these people, that they came back and spread the word and said, hey, he's back. Let's go. Let's check this out. And I think if you have a community established, people will follow you to the ends of the earth. Well, assuming you're not a jerk, but they'll follow and they'll support you in whatever you do. And I think that in internet broadcasting is a key.
We're obviously talking about the community that's based around your show with your followers and your viewers. There's also a separate community, and that's the broadcasting community. And I think that is a vital part of having a successful brand and show. When you get the support of other broadcasters, I think you go a long way. I mean, we have like a little group that we talk every now and then, and I think the IAIB has helped with that tremendously, where people have met other people and they've become quite friendly and they actually help each other out. I think when you link up your brand with other people, and like Steve, you do a squeaky clean show. I mean, there's nothing adult about what you're doing. I mean,
correct.
You're talking about technology. I mean, that's mature,
right.
But well, at times, who knows? When we talk about the whole iPhone, when Apple versus Mac, it becomes pretty childish. But Apple versus Windows. But my content is a little to the other side. I mean, I do a show on Fridays, and that's, TVMA, like it's pretty adult. The show gets insane. We're all drinking. We're all, talking about the things that I don't want to talk about on the show. But it's interesting how different people could actually become friends and kind of help each other. I mean, if you go based on our content, we should not really be talking right now. But when you meet other people, it kind of changes, and you build this weird little bubble with all different types of people.
I think the biggest thing people need to get past is their egos. I think that, just like you just said, everybody has their own content. Everybody has their own beliefs. Everybody has the things that they like. And if you could set all that stuff aside, set your ego aside, and come in and just be you, I think that the broadcasting community would be a lot better placed. I mean, not this guy versus this guy, this show versus this show. Listen, there's plenty of room for everybody out there, and everybody's good at what they do.
There's no competition.
There's no competition. Nobody's competing. I'm not competing with anybody. Nobody's, well, at least not to my knowledge.
No, I mean, you know what, this competition, I'll tell you, there can be competition if you're doing a show at 2 o'clock and I'm doing a show at 2 o'clock and we're both doing a very similar show. Now we're competing for that audience, right? Technically, for the live show. But because everything is available on demand,
I was just going to say that.
It doesn't exist anymore. I mean, I guess you're competing for the chat room, but really, I don't believe in competition. I think there's plenty of room. I think there's plenty of room for you to co-host the show with me, me to co-host the show with you, and for one of your co-hosts to come on my show and one of mine to go on yours. I think there's plenty of room for that. And I think that is the beauty of what we do. You can't really do that on radio. When you're a competing station, if you're on K-Rock and I'm on, PLJ, you will never see a PLJ personality on K-Rock. That's just not going to happen. But in what we do, that's the beauty of it. You could tap into someone's audience and gain, a significant number of people.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a tremendous overflow of audience. I mean, your viewers watch mine, my viewers watch your show. A lot of people from Twit watch my show. A lot of people from other networks come on. I mean, that's just how it is. That's the nature of it because the community is so small.
I think, too, that just like you were saying about time slots competing, it's like, listen, if you've got a guest on, let's say you had a celebrity on and I'm just doing my normal routine, I would hope people would choose to watch your show when you have somebody of that type of caliber to go on. I mean, you can always catch my show on demand. It's one of those things like, okay, Andrew's a friend. I know he's not. I mean, we've been doing this for years, and we both had these time slots, not to stiff each other, but we just did it because it worked best for our schedule. Common sense to me, if I wasn't doing the show, well, I'm going to watch Andrew's show because it has an opportunity where I could interact live with his celebrity, where maybe I wouldn't normally get to talk with them. And not that we don't like Steve, but we'll watch a show later on demand, so then he gets the download for it. I don't understand what the hubbub's about. You know what I mean?
No, I think there's plenty of room to grow. To kind of wrap things up, let's talk about what the future of the Tech Buzz is. What do you want to do with the Tech Buzz network over the next 5 years? Let's look at the lifespan of this, and let's look at the evolution of what you're doing. Where do you want to be in 5 years?
Well, I'd love to continue moving forward and building this production company that I'd like to do, and go on location to help broadcast certain events and things like that. As long as I'd be able to do it full time to where I could afford to do it full time. But also I'd like to add more and more shows to the network. I want content that's different from anybody else's network. Again, back to the meme that we talked about earlier. I don't want just another show that matches somebody else's show on a network. I want something that nobody's seen yet, or maybe hasn't thought of, or they do it, but we could do it better type of a thing, because of the expertise of the host that would be coming on. So in the next 5 years, I'd like to see that. And I'd like to say to the folks that follow and support that's what I would like to try to bring to you, is content that's not replicating other content, but trying to find those unique niche shows that maybe haven't been thought of just based on my experience or somebody else's experience, where they specialize in specific areas and build a show around it. And kind of like that throwing show that I'm doing now. I have no interest in throwing, but nobody's doing a show about it.
So you're not talking about actually someone getting upset and throwing a phone at someone, right?
Yeah, no.
Explain what the throwing show is.
The throwing show is for like track and field, shot put, and discus. And what really makes this unique is the host is an All-American. She's third in the nation. So she's got some great accolades, and she's training for the Olympics in 2016. So she's got a lot of credentials to be talking about this. So I think that's what kind of brings some uniqueness to it for high school and college students. She's already has such a huge following. I one day think that very soon that her numbers are going to surpass mine.
And that's great. I mean, that's amazing.
It is great.
Yeah.
To me, that's a testament of my belief, seeing a diamond in the rough. And again, I enjoy being behind the scenes, but that's the kind of content I want to see in the next 5 years to bring to the network. And I think you're striving to do that. And I think more and more, like, okay, we brought up Twit. Twit's doing a Mac show. I'm not going to turn around and do a Mac show. Why would I compete and talk about that? I mean, I learned that before years ago. Yeah. You know, you're gonna go to Twit. That's just how it is. So and that's what I mean by there's room for everybody. And that's where I think you need, as an internet broadcaster, be yourself. And I've learned this. Be yourself, go out there. You can pick things up from other broadcasters that would benefit you, but use your imagination, use your creativity to find something that you could do and harness your strong points. And that's what I'm trying. I don't have it all together, but I'm trying.
So are you what other shows, like give me 3 shows that you would like to add to the Tech Buzz, you know, to your network? You know, other than technology, obviously, you're looking to kind of get away from the tech stuff, which I think is a great idea. The more diverse content you have, the different audience you're going to bring for each of those shows. And you know what? They'll cross over. We have a hair loss show, and this crazy part is they watch the tech show now. And because they watch the tech show, they're watching the Tech Buzz when you're doing broadcast now. And that's the craziest thing when I see, you know, a guy named Bald Jerry in your chat room just hanging out in there. I mean, it's amazing to me, really. I mean, that really is amazing. But what other types of content would you like to add?
You know, it's funny because we had this joke going on. If you saw the tweet that I've been putting out earlier today about coming on here, saying it's my constitutional right. A lot of people they don't know, but I'm big on following the Constitution, and not to get into that here. But like the political side, a buddy of mine who lives in Pittsburgh, about an hour away, he wants to do like a show where he just kind of goes off, like kind of. Again, this kind of falls into the category of like an Alex Jones, Rush Limbaugh type show, because he's heavy into that and wanted me to kind of work with him on that. And I don't know how I feel about that yet. So that was something that he had brought up. But then I actually had some people that they know I hunt and I fish, and they were like, you should do an outdoor show.
I think that's a great idea. Yeah, I think that is a brilliant idea.
Do a fishing show or a hunting show and show it with some GoPros. And my father-in-law was even like, "Oh, I'll help you. I'll be your cameraman," and do like kind of on location type stuff. And so these are the types of things. And I know there's stuff like that out there, but people that like me, they like my personality. It's just one other thing that they could have as content, especially if people are into that type of stuff. Or I have a buddy who's his nickname's Barbarian, and he could take any firearm, show you how to dismantle it, how to clean it, he's really good when it comes to outdoor stuff, firearms stuff. He made a joke and he was like, "Hey, I'd love to come on and do a survivalist show in your studio and show people things that they need to do to survive a natural disaster like an earthquake or hurricane." Forget, let's not get into conspiracy theories, but like something like that. And I thought, that's a good idea. That's something that he has 30 plus years experience doing.
I think that's great. Yeah.
Doing something like that. And so we're kind of investigating that. If you guys are interested in seeing that, hit me up on Twitter. I'd love to know your thoughts before going into it. But Andrew, that's the type of content that, pull from resources that I know of people that are local here that maybe have a passion about a project, and I could stick them in front of a camera and produce it.
I gotta, and we need to wrap up because we're almost at an hour, but you brought up something interesting, talking about, survivalism and all this stuff. Somebody asked me, what do you think will be the next big trend with podcasts? It seemed like for a while it was podcasts about podcasts. Like people are doing, this is how to podcast on this podcast. And I feel like a lot of people did that about a year ago. I think the next big thing will be a let's learn together type show. Let's discover things together. I'm not an expert on anything, really. I'm an enthusiast more than anything else. So if I'm into, let's say, conspiracy theories, let's do a conspiracy theory show where I'm discovering these conspiracies for the first time with you. And let us talk about it. Let us learn about it together. I think something like that is something different and interesting. Rather than me sitting here telling you this is the right thing, let's do this together and kind of figure it out together. I think that's going to be the next move. I've already seen a trend where a lot of people are doing stuff like that, where they're picking a certain topic. Like, I'm a big World War II fan. I would love to do a World War II type show where we go down history. and we talk
Right.
about, things that happen at certain points in the war. I don't know enough to do that, but if I present it in a way where we're learning it together, I think something like that would be interesting.
Well, and it's funny you should say that, because that's kind of the direction we took in broadcast now. I don't know everything about broadcasting, and I hope it doesn't come across that way. But what I'm trying to present with this, and Michael Myers, my new co-host, Michael knows a lot. He knows a lot about stuff that I have no clue about, and I don't make any bones about it. But we're trying to present things in a way that, hey, let's learn as we go. I learn something new every week, and let's put this out there and say, hey, this is where we made mistakes when we started. Learn from our mistakes.
Yeah.
And how you can make it better, and engaging the chat room to say, well, I know a better way, or I know a better solution. And I think you're dead on. I think these type of shows where let's learn together, let's get in there and let's get our hands dirty and not be afraid to get on camera and say, hey, I know nothing about this. And that's kind of where I would be with my buddy with the whole government conspiracy type of thing. I know enough to just bounce questions off of him. That this guy is a political nutcase. I mean, that's probably the best way I could put it, in a good way. But he would make you think. And I think that, like I said, I think that is going along with what you said. I think that's where people need to be kind of gearing toward for different shows. People get tired of the same old. And I think that's why even you doing these spotlights, getting different views and different opinions, I think it helps people that are aspiring to be broadcasters kind of get some ideas about where they need to go and how they need to do some things.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, we don't really concentrate on the technical stuff with the broadcast. I mean, I leave that to you and Broadcast Now. I mean, that's you guys are good at that, and that's what we do. I want to hear people's stories. I think that's captivating to someone that is just getting into this, or, to hear about the struggle of doing this. It's almost like a support group, right? You're hearing the same things, and you're saying, wow, I guess I'm not the only one. It's almost a comfort of sorts for people. Steve, I had a great time. I can't believe an hour went by. We should do this again. We could talk for hours, really. The techbuzz.net is the website. All things Stephen Heywood is on there. Steve does, how many shows are you doing right now yourself on the network?
I do 2, and I produce 2.
You're doing Broadcast Now,
Weekly Roundup,
and a Weekly Roundup, and you're producing. Oh, Jeff Adams also a really good guy. I've met him. Yep. He came here to New York over the summer. Great guy. Jeff Adams show is on there too, and Throws Unlimited is also on there. Which correct. I think it's a great way of thinking outside of the box when it comes to this type of broadcasting. People can follow you on Twitter, obviously at the Tech Buzz. Also, you're on Facebook. You got a Facebook group. Do you have a personal Twitter?
I do. If you're into anti-government, let's say that, tweets, I will accept you. It's private, but it's Heywood Stephen. It's just my name backwards. And
very avant-garde of you, Steve. Very avant-garde with the backwards name.
I'm sorry. No, my buddy got to me. And then on Facebook, it's the Tech Buzz Fan is the fan page that you can go on and
excellent.
Learn all about that stuff.
Also, Steve is on the IAIB. If you guys have any questions for Steve, you could shoot it right there on our forum. We got a great group of people on there, a great group of industry providers and industry insiders on the forum, always looking to help people. I mean, it's amazing how someone could ask a question within an hour or two. Someone is the answer for them. And everything is archived there, and that's the beauty of it. You could search, and the answer will come right up. I want to remind everybody, if you miss any portion of the show, of course, you could catch it on our website, ibroadcastnetwork.org, or, of course, on our other website, gfknetwork.com, which is my site. You can follow me on Twitter at Andrew Zarian. IAIB is also on Twitter. We're going to have everything archived. We're on iTunes. We're on everywhere podcasts are available. Next week, we're going to have another great guest for you. So stay tuned. We're going to let you know during the week who the guest is. I like to keep it a secret. I like to have a little suspense with our guest. And we'll see you all next week, guys. Steve, thanks again. I really appreciate it.